This time in the Magic Kitchen, we're joined by Kore Ravensea to discuss pagan parenting.
I'm Leandra Witchwood.
And I'm Elyse Wells.
And welcome to the Magic Kitchen podcast, where we talk about magic, kitchen witchcraft, herbs,
and everything in between.
Kore Ravensea is a new pagan children's author. Her book, A Sea Story, was available for official purchase in October 2022 and is now also available on Amazon Kindle. Kore is a mother of three and has been practicing Wicca in some form since the early 2000s. Kore primarily practices Gardenerian Wicca and leads a coven in this tradition. Kore has a passion for teaching pagan parents how to interact with children and for making topics not covered by other books accessible, such as death and dying. Kore presented at Philadelphia Pagan Pride in September of 2020 on pagan parenting tips and has written articles related to pagan parenting as well on Darksome Moon. So thank you for joining us. This is a topic we get a lot of questions about, and as a non-parent myself, I always defer to Leandra, but we've wanted to have somebody else on who can create a dialogue on this topic, because it's obviously like parenting of any type. There's a lot of opinions and ways to do it right, and it's the more the merrier.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah. I'm excited about this because I'm a parent of two. They're older children. So my son is 14 now. He just had his birthday this past Saturday. I'm looking back at the time that's gone by and I'm like, wow, like I have been a pagan parent this entire time, and I'm not even sure how I did it sometimes. And I love talking to other parents about it because then it gives me perspective like, oh, well, yeah, I kind of intuitively did XYZ, or, that in my parenting days, like the only thing, we didn't have really any songs, we didn't have any stories and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate your work.
Thank you. I really appreciate you saying that. That's my goal, to get a couple of children's books out there on topics that are not already present in the literature, because like you said, there's still not a ton for us as pagan parents out there.
Right. Can you tell us tell our audience a little bit about your book, A Sea Story?
Sure. So it had to be about 3 years ago. I did a survey to the general pagan community and parents specifically in that community. And I said, what are books that we really need for our children in pagan parenting? And the number one answer was death and dying. I don't know how to explain death and dying to my child. And there's certainly nothing out there that really explains it from a pagan viewpoint. So that's where I kind of started launching ideas for Sea Story. The actual book itself, one of the parts in there is an actual true story that happened with me and my son, where we were watching a sunset, and I kind of noted to him how the setting of the sun and the rising of the moon and the changing of the tides were all like how there is change in the universe, just like death and rebirth. So that was actually a real thing that happened, a real discussion that took place between my son and I. And I chose to include that in the book because I just thought that was the perfect analogy to describe it to especially younger kids.
Yeah, that's beautiful.
It is. I like that a lot. The Magic Kitchen podcast is funded and supported by thewitchwoodteahouse.com, offering a variety of hand-blended loose leaf teas as well as loose herbs for all of your ritual, spell work, wellness, and everyday enjoyment needs. If you would like to support this podcast while sipping a great cup of tea, head over to thewitchwoodteahouse.com and find the magic that's in store for you.
So I was thinking about this parenting, pagan parenting as a topic. And like you said, how there isn't that many books on it. And I realized, I think the reason for that is because we're in a really unique time period. It's honestly probably a first of a kind, because we now have third generation witches, open witches, not a lot still, but that's probably the max of a generation you might have, where they're raising children now and they're out of the broom closet, and they maybe have a little bit they can pass on from the way their parents raised them, but really the broom closet is opening for the first time, in record. And I think pagan parenting is really just now starting to be a topic. So I wanted to just ask you, how have you seen that change in the discussion of pagan parenting since your beginnings, 20 years ago?
Yeah. Well, 20 years ago, I wasn't a parent, but I notice a lot of changes within the broader communities. One thing is that a lot more events allow space for children, or they have something there for children to do. In my bio, I put about Philadelphia Pagan Pride. When you go to Philadelphia Pagan Pride, they have a whole children's booth set up where children can make things like mandalas, they can make dream catchers, they can make bracelets. So there's always people there running that. And then there's a labyrinth for the children to walk. I've found that people are more open to having children at ritual, as long as the child's not, toddler age and is going to scream and disrupt the entire ritual. And, just bigger pagan events. Most often my experience in the recent past has been, you're welcome to bring your children. And please, if you bring your children, run something for the children there, do something for the children there. So I've been empowered to do that a few times by not only the Gardenerian community, but by the general pagan communities in my area.
Oh, I think that's a really, really good point, because I know raising my kids and still my son, whenever there was a discussion at our PPD meetings or any kind of public ritual and that sort of thing, it was always, well, what are the kids going to do? What are we doing for the kids? So Elyse's High Priestess and myself, we did a whole ritual that was just for the kids. Mm-hmm. And we had the kids transform themselves into, different animals by movement, and letting them be kids and letting them be in their body. And it was funny because then as soon as the kids started making noise and slithering like snakes and roaring like lions and stuff, all of a sudden we saw adults coming over and joining us, which was kind of fun. And I think
that's what I was going to say. Witchcraft is all about embracing and honoring the inner child, and having multiple generations present down to the youngest is so important for that. It's permissive.
It is. And you made a good point about getting involved. Pagan parents need to get involved in order for the kids to be recognized. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a hard thing, because we always want it done for us, which is nice.
Yeah, I actually had, I was a part of running a gather a few years ago where we wanted to make it a family friendly event. And some of the adults with kids were like, well, will there be babysitting available? And we're like, well, we don't have the capacity to do that. But I did run I think all the children events there, except for maybe one. And one of them that we did was, so it was around Lammas. We did a Lammas ritual, and we had the kids bake Lammas men out of cornbread that they could then eat as a part of the ritual. And we did a children's music hour with, pagan chants are pretty simple. Kids can pick up the melody. So that was really lovely too. And
Good.
Honestly, like there were a bunch of adults involved in those things.
Right. Like get in touch with that inner child too. I love that. So in thinking of, there's always difficulties that come with pagan parenting or parenting period. But I think being a pagan parent adds to those difficulties. What difficulties do you see, either a pattern or that you find in your path with your children being most prevalent? Because I'm sure our listeners have experienced the same.
So there's a multitude of challenges when, being a pagan parent. I think, number one is that we're not wholly understood as a community. There's so many different groups that fall under the label of pagan. So even if you like go to a Wiccan circle, a Druid circle might be completely different. My son came home, I want to say about a month ago. There's some Christian good news club at their school. And he said, "Mom, how do I start a witchcraft club?" And
Yes.
I said,
I love it.
that's a really great idea. But where we are geographically, I don't know that they would go for that. So I had to kind of explain that to him and explain, sometimes we have to be a little careful about what we say. We might want to choose our words carefully, not necessarily use the word witch. And, when we're talking about just like, what does mom do? Like, what does dad do? Like, I'm fortunate enough to have a ritual space in my home. And when he has friends over, I have to tell him, like, please don't let your friends in that room. Not only because there's sacred items in there, but because I'm afraid, like, his friends are going to start asking questions and then it's going to lead to negative assumptions with other parents. So that's kind of how I cut that off from even being an issue. He likes to go in there. I trust him in there. My other two kids are like very hyperactive, so I do not let them go in there. But so I think like the biggest challenge is just being understood by the greater world. And depending on where you are geographically, that can be really hard. We live in a pretty Christian area, unfortunately, like 95% of the United States. And
Yep.
Coming out of the broom closet is not easy. And I don't necessarily want my children to experience any prejudice because of that. So I would say that's the biggest challenge. The second biggest challenge would be like groups that are not welcoming to parents, which I have come across in my years in the craft. I've seen both ends of the spectrum. I've seen groups where they allow women to breastfeed in circle and have the infant in circle. And then I've seen groups where they've said, no, you're not allowed to have kids or you can't practice this tradition. And I think that that's absolutely absurd. Even though it's challenging, like being a mother is an asset to being a part of any pagan tradition, because it's all about the world and the cycle of life and the beauty of that. So being a parent, if anything, I think is an asset.
Yeah, I can see that point. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like literally the creatrix. Like it's the most, like, I just can't, as a non-parent, I can't get over the miracle that, I hate to use that Christianized word, that like awe-inspiring fact of creation, that like my body could grow a person.
Human.
Like that's wild. Motherhood is easily one of the most spiritual experiences I assume a person can have. It just has to be. It's so it's awesome in the like true sense of the word,
Yeah, it's kind of like an initiation, like if you belong to a tradition where there's an initiation involved, you can't really describe that to someone unless they've been through it. It's the same thing in my experience with motherhood. Like, it's so powerful and transformational that I could describe it to you, but I would fall short trying to describe it with just words.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense to me. I just get that impression as being on the outside of it. And I had a question about, like, this is a hard one. It's personal, so answer it in the way you feel most comfortable. And Leandra, I'm really curious on your side of this too, because I mean, it's just, I want to hear as many perspectives as possible. I want our listeners to hear as many perspectives. Does your partner share your beliefs? If they do or don't, how does that help? Or what are the conversations that come up because of it? And if you've had the opportunity as a high priestess to help coven mates or friends through that as well, like if there was anything you'd feel comfortable sharing, just like to have the perspective on that, because I would say almost every person I talk to doesn't have a partner with the same belief set, and I think that can be really challenging with raising kids. So any insight you have on that side of it?
Yeah, I've been very fortunate. My partner that I had my biological son with, we went through everything together. They are not just Gardenerian, they practice other traditions as well, like Kemetic orthodoxy. But we do and have always shared the same beliefs in terms of, the general wheel of the year for pagans, everything that goes into being a pagan, we have agreed on. So I think that made it a lot easier because we actually did things like we would sit down and have dumb suppers with our son and explain, like, read the story of Persephone, or explain like that we were leaving offerings out for the dead. And, around springtime, we would frame any kind of egg hunts around spring. So I think it's very helpful to have a parent that has the same beliefs. I know by and large, from what I've seen, a lot of people don't have partners that have the same belief. My current partner was kind of like agnostic before he met me. And then he started asking all these questions and was like, oh my goodness, like I've been getting signs all along, like since my childhood, that I was supposed to do this. And I don't know why I never did. So, within the pagan community, obviously there are variances. You're not going to share exactly the same beliefs on every single thing, but, just raising the kids and having that help from a co-parent is really useful.
And I come from the opposite, where my husband and I don't share the same belief systems. I think he was raised Roman Catholic, but it's an interesting dynamic in my household because he doesn't care. Like, he doesn't care what I do. He knows not to touch the candles when they're burning. Like, he's very respectful of it. But I think that comes from both of his parents, who his mother is Roman Catholic and his father is Protestant. So they already came from kind of opposing viewpoints religiously. And yeah, we've always raised our kids to be open-minded. If they want to learn about Buddhism, go learn. If you want to go to church, go to church. If you want to learn about whatever it is you are curious about, go for it. And I think my daughter, who is in her 20s, she's more decided that she's more atheist, and my son is undecided, and he will, continue to explore however he wants to explore. So when I'm doing rituals, he'll come out and share them with me, and he'll be like, okay, cool, later, see ya. But, I'm not going to never raised my children, and I won't continue to raise my children the way I was raised. I was raised, you had to be in the church, from catechism to, being a missionary in my high school years. And I think, and I'm grateful that my husband supports that he's not like, well, they have to go to church, and he doesn't really do much. So I think it balances out in the end.
Yeah. Would you say in your experience as a pagan parent that pagan parents are more open to that? Because that's my experience. Like,
yes. Yeah, definitely.
My son, like, he will go to church with his grandparents and he'll come back and he'll be like, they took me to church. It was really boring. But like, he still has that opportunity to go, and I'm not barring him from doing that.
Right. Right. And I think that's what helps in the long run. It helps him experience it rather than resent it. And I know growing up, especially when I started really questioning the church and trying to find myself and my own path, when I started questioning, well, why am I supposed to fear a God that gave me free will? The whole, landslide of analyzing the philosophy in the church. And, when I could go over here and still be a good, peaceful person with a good moral standing, and I don't have this looming threat over me type thing. Mm-hmm. And so I think what I experience with my kids is that if I allow them to explore, they're able to do it fully. There's no resentment there. They're not, dreading the process. They're experiencing the process,
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
Are you enjoying the show? If you are, we'd really appreciate a 5-star review. It helps us to reach more listeners like you and to keep doing the Magic Kitchen podcast. Thank you.
So this one, I think, for me, it's an important question. And it relates to school and public perception of you as a pagan parent. We kind of touched on this a little bit, but I know when we get into the school atmosphere, it becomes a really sticky wicket. Mm-hmm. Real quick, I'll just tell you a real quick story about how my daughter ousted me in school. So I've had my blog for a very long time. And when she was in high school, they were doing the Salem witch trials. So they were discussing like how they would accuse people of witchcraft. And so they did this whole skit where they set someone up in the class to be the witch. And the class, instead of jumping to the conclusion, they had to find empirical evidence that linked that person to witchcraft. So my daughter, the cunning little girl she was at the time, and she's still very cunning, but she used my blog to oust the person that was accused. And the way she did it is he had a cup of apple cinnamon applesauce in his bag. Okay. And she used my blog with the magical properties of cinnamon and apple to nail him as the witch.
That's so creative.
So that's how I was ousted, and that's how everybody knew that her parent was a witch. So it never really had any repercussions, except I do notice my husband coaches soccer, and my son's on the soccer team. I do notice that there is a drastic distance that people keep between me and themselves and their children. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you've experienced anything like that.
Yeah. I don't have like hard evidence that this is the reason, but when my son would play baseball, I would just kind of wear witchy shirts, like, cause it's the weekend. I'm going to wear whatever I feel comfortable in, and show up with a book, usually a witchcraft book, and sit and watch him play baseball. And none of the other parents engaged with me. Now, I don't really care that much because I'm an introverted person and I'm there to see my son play. But I wonder, if that was the reason that they kind of distanced themselves.
Growing up in the church, I remember what I was taught about other people, and that you should, never. It wasn't a message of kindness. So I never really thought about it much until I was in the school system with my kids and saw how people kind of like give you the side eye. And you're like, wait, okay, what's going on here? And can you give parents any good advice of how to handle that if you think that maybe you're being ousted because of your path?
Mm-hmm. I think it's always really, really important to be careful because we do still live in a society that's very judgmental of these things and they don't understand. There are people out there that still think that witches worship Satan. They believe, they watch horror movies and believe that that's what we engage in. And so I think like being careful is paramount. Whenever possible, just kind of use your discretion and share as little as possible. Like, I will only really come out to people that I know are safe or I deem safe. So, for example, we moved over the summer and we have these like very, very Christian neighbors. And they tried to invite us to their church, social, something or other. And I said, like, no, I appreciate the invite, but we don't come from a Christian background. And I just kind of left it at that, like kind of vague language. And then, of course they see like, 8 or 9 cars in my driveway every weekend, and they must wonder what we're doing over here. One time, one of my students backed her car into a tree and shattered her back window glass all over. And so we were just like on the ground picking out glass from the tree and from the grass. And the neighbor walks over and he was like, "Are you guys looking for fairies? Like, what are you doing?" And, I thought that was kind of funny that he said that. But again, just like trying to be careful. I was like, "Oh, this is my cousin. These are my cousins. This is my, nephew, whatever." And kind of just left it at that. I've heard other people say like, "Oh, this is my book club that meets at this time. We're just a generic book club. That's how we know each other.
Nothing to see here."
Yeah. And just kind of like, you don't have to come out as a witch to anybody. Like,
no, you don't.
Nobody is forcing you to do that. Just like if you're, LGBTQ, like nobody should force you out of the closet. You should be ready and you should trust the people that you're coming out to. So I think the same goes for parents. Use your discretion. If somebody comes at you accusing you of being a witch, I don't know. If someone did that to me, it would probably depend on my mood that day. And if I was feeling sassy, I might be like, "Yeah, I'm a witch. What are you going to do about it?" But, I might also say, "I'm not sure where you got that information, but I don't do anything to harm my children. And, what we practice is earth-based and natural, and there's nothing harmful about it."
Right. And I think I've experienced this in the past where mainstream people try to use that witchcraft card as evidence that you're a bad parent or that you're doing bad things. And it's scary for parents to be confronted with that kind of thing when you've done nothing wrong except exist. And it's terrifying to know that there are other parents out there or other people out there who would use that as some sort of evidence of some harm being done.
I think it's just important to affirm, like, there's nothing harmful about this. Right. Keep it generic. Like, this is an earth-based tradition. We believe in worshiping the elements. Some of us believe in deity. Some of us use multiple deities. Just like the Catholics have saints, not so dissimilar. We have a celebration of cakes and wine, just like communion. We're a family. We enjoy each other. We celebrate the changes of the seasons. None of that sounds scary to me.
Right. Same here.
And when you frame it in that way, I think people tend to be a little less cautious and more receptive.
Yeah. Okay. So in that light, with the religious overtone, since our culture is so focused on the secular holidays, which follow the Christian worship calendar, how does pagan parenting affect the way you celebrate the holidays? Do you still celebrate some of the more Christian holidays?
So the only Christian holiday that we celebrate is Christmas, and it's more like a secular Christmas. We do a whole big thing that time of year. We celebrate the solstice, and then we celebrate Christmas in a secular way. And then afterwards, we celebrate the Epiphany and the Italian witch La Befana, which I wrote an article about a while ago, because my ancestry is Italian. And so it was important for me to kind of incorporate that into my children's lives. And so we do a lot of stuff that time of year. But the only Christian holiday I would say we celebrate is Christmas. And it's more about like Santa and exchanging gifts with people to make them feel good, rather than like nothing really Christian comes up in the context of Christmas, if that makes sense.
I think a lot of parents do that. I know that's how we celebrate. It's not religious, it's secular. So Santa and, pretty lights. I have my own traditions that I do more solitary, but like this year, my son participated with me, where I make the bird feeders and I hang them in the trees. And I prefer that than actually going out and getting the tree and decorating the tree, because I don't like the mess. I don't like hauling the tree in and out of the house. I would rather decorate my yard. So, and I try to turn toward the natural elements of it. So, feeding the birds, feeding the wildlife, the urban wildlife. And that's something that I think parents, pagan parents in particular, really appreciate, because it takes us away from that money, buy gifts, the whole capitalistic view of it. But it's giving of yourself, which is the spirit of it, in essence.
Well, we always, every year we adopt a family, and Elyse and I kind of co-run a group called Baltimore Pagans, Witches and Friends. And every year we accept donations for families in need around the holidays. I love your ideas about like hanging the bird feeders. I just wanted to mention, so our tree, it's artificial because we have animals and, sometimes it can be toxic to them. But there are really cool ways to make your tree a little bit pagan. One of them is hanging tarot cards on the tree. So I've definitely done that before. I did that this year. My son also decided he wanted to hang Pokemon cards on the tree.
That's great.
So, there's a way you can kind of make it more solstice themed and less, traditional Christian. I mean,
yeah. Totally get it. Yeah. And I think maybe that's something that as pagan parents, we could maybe be better at, just thinking outside the box a little bit, like the tarot cards. I love that on the tree. And like my brain always goes to like the old timey stuff. Like you see the candles actually on the tree. I'm like, not safe, but I'd love to do that, But like getting creative with it like that. I like the Pokemon cards for the kids, especially because that's a piece of them being displayed. They're part of it. I like that.
Yeah. And, instead of an angel on the top of the tree, there's a star. And obviously the star has meaning to us as pagans. And, there's lots of things you can do. You can do the stuff with the candles. If you use like battery operated candles, they really are beautiful. The trees with all the candles on them. Just have to be careful and safe about it.
Yeah.
But, just little ways to make Christmas pagan and reframe some of these things. Like I almost kind of said this year, it's like we're leaving an offering out for Santa, like he's a deity that's coming.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that.
Yes. Makes sense. Even if he's just an egregore, he's still got energy.
Mm-hmm.
Are you ready to start living a magical life? Join me in my Patreon community where I am sharing rituals for every Sabbath and full moon, weekly journal prompts, and new on the new moon articles highlighting new practices from around the world. Joining a community can be the thing you need to keep your practice active and engaging. For more information, visit patreon.com/Elyse Wells or follow the community link on seekingnumina.com. Well, if you have any insights, if it's not allowed to be shared, I understand. But if you wanted to share anything about any upcoming books, we'd love to hear it.
I did start writing another book, and I do have an illustrator in mind. I don't necessarily want to reveal the topic quite yet, but it is another one of those topics that I kind of talked to pagan parents, and they said there's a need for this type of book. So it's different. It's not on death and dying, but it is going to be, I think, an important piece for pagan parents to teach their children about the cycles of the seasons and the wheel of the year.
That sounds exciting. I like it. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm looking forward to it. And before we go, if you could just share for everybody how they can find you and connect with you. We'll put all your links in the show notes as well.
Sure. So I have a Facebook page, Kore Ravensea, Pagan Children's author. I have also an Instagram. My Instagram handle is of the Sea Witch. You can email me at koreravensea@gmail.com. My book is currently available at Pendraig Publishing and also on Kindle. So if you want to get a Kindle version, save some paper, be eco-friendly, you can download it right there on Kindle. And I think that's pretty much it.
All right. And like I said, we'll put all those links in the show notes. And I'm excited to see if we get any follow-up questions for you or about pagan parenting and how this will help, because I always appreciate too, like we'll get messages from listeners just saying like, that was an episode I really needed. So I'll pass on any of that feedback that we get to you as well.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And that, I just want to say to all the pagan parents out there, it's not an easy road, but it's not impossible. And, it's important to me and to the people I know to share your beliefs with your children, just like it's important for any other person that has a different religion to be able to do so. So don't lose heart and know that there are other pagan parents out there with similar struggles, and there are creative ways to get through them, and just be you.
It's great.
Yes,
thank you very much.
Thank you for that. Thanks for being here.
You're so welcome. Thank you so much for inviting me on the show. It was an honor.
It was great having you.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Merry meet,
Merry part,
and merry meet again. Thank you for joining us on the Magic Kitchen podcast. Please visit my website, leandrawitchwood.com, for news, information, and more episodes.
I'm Elyse Wells, and I can be found at Seeking Numina on YouTube, Instagram, and Facebook, and seekingnumina.com. That's Seeking, Numina.